All right, let's talk about one of the biggest, boldest climate experiments on the planet, the European Union's carbon market. It's a massive system with a really simple, almost ruthless goal: make pollution so expensive that nobody wants to do it anymore. But the thing is, for years, it was kind of a failure. So, is it finally working? Let's dig in.
Just think about the sheer scale of the challenge. How in the world do you get thousands of power plants, steel mills, and now even giant cargo ships across 27 different countries to completely change the way they operate? It's a truly monumental problem.
Well, the EU's answer is, in theory, pretty simple. Instead of trying to ban pollution outright, which is basically impossible, they decided to just put a price tag on it. It all comes down to basic economics, right? If it costs you more to pollute than it does to invest in clean tech, well, you're going to make the smart choice.
So how did they actually build this thing? The whole system is built on a concept called a cap-and-trade system. The easiest way to think about it is like a pollution budget for the entire economy. The EU sets a firm limit, that's the cap, on the total amount of greenhouse gases that can be pumped out. Then, for every single ton of CO2 a company releases, it needs a permit, or an allowance. And here's the cool part. If a company cleans up its act and doesn't need all its allowances, it can sell the spares to someone who does. That's the trade.
And make no mistake, this isn't some friendly, voluntary program. For the 11,000 or so power plants and factories covered by this, it is absolutely mandatory. If you emit a ton of carbon, you must have an allowance to cover it. If you don't, you're looking at some serious fines. We're talking €100 for every missing permit, plus you still have to go out and buy it anyway.
So, does that threat actually work? Oh, you bet it does. The compliance rate is pretty staggering. Back in 2022, it was over 99%. That tells you this system has some incredibly sharp teeth. Companies really have no choice but to play by the rules.
But here's the twist in the story. For most of its history, those sharp teeth didn't really matter, because the system had this fundamental, crippling flaw. The whole market was completely broken.
So the system kicks off back in 2005, right? But for the next 15 years, it was kinda useless. After the 2008 financial crisis hit, industry slowed way down, nobody needed pollution permits, and the price just crashed to almost nothing. And it stayed that way for a long time. Even as recently as 2020, prices were, as one expert put it, ridiculously low, almost always under €30.
So why? Why were prices so rock bottom? This quote really nails it. Regulators had just flooded the market with way too many permits. These are called European Union allowances, or EUAs for short. You had this huge, permanent surplus. And it's just basic supply and demand, right? When there's way too much of something, its price plummets. And that right there was the fatal flaw. Think about it. If it only cost you a few euros to emit a ton of carbon, why on earth would your company spend millions on brand new clean technology? You just wouldn't. The economic signal was way too weak, and the system just wasn't doing its job. So, faced with this failing system, regulators knew they had to step in. Their solution was to fix that massive oversupply and create the one thing that gives these pollution permits their value: scarcity.
And this is where the hero of our story comes in, the Market Stability Reserve, or MSR, which kicked in around 2019. It basically created this crystal clear before and after moment. It took the market from a low-price, low-incentive mess to something that could actually drive change. The MSR was a total game changer.
So how does this MSR thing actually work? Honestly, it's kind of brilliant. Think of it like a smart, automated vacuum cleaner for all those extra pollution permits. Every year, the system checks to see how many spare allowances are floating around. If that number is above a certain line, then, poof, a big chunk of them, currently 24%, are automatically sucked out of the market and put into this reserve. It's a simple, rule-based fix that keeps politics out of it.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The results really speak for themselves. Just look at this. Back in 2017, you had this massive surplus of permits, a whopping 1.7 billion tons. By 2023, the MSR had helped slash that down to 1.1 billion. That massive reduction is what tightened the market and sent the price of pollution soaring.
And this gets us back to the whole point of the system, right? The theory only works if polluting is actually expensive. For 15 years, it wasn't. The MSR is what finally flipped that switch. It created real scarcity, and that scarcity turned the carbon price into a powerful reason for industries to finally truly change.
So now that they finally got this powerful tool working, the EU isn't just sitting back. Nope, they're hitting the accelerator. The ambition for what comes next is even bigger. This big expansion is all part of a massive new plan called Fit for 55, which is all about cutting the EU's total emissions by 55% by 2030. But to get there, the sectors inside this carbon market have to do even more of the heavy lifting. They're facing a much steeper target, a 62% cut. And to do that, you need a bigger, stronger carbon market. And here's where things get really wild. The system is expanding in a huge way. First, it's pulling in international shipping. Then, starting in 2027, they're launching a whole new, separate carbon market to cover two gigantic parts of the economy: all the cars and trucks on the road, and all the fuels we use to heat our homes and offices.
Now, let's just pause and think about what this really means. This isn't just about giant factories anymore. For the very first time, this policy is going to put a direct EU-wide price on the gasoline you put in your car and the natural gas that heats your home. It is a really bold and, you could say, politically risky move to push decarbonization into every part of our lives.
So after a really shaky start, the EU has transformed its carbon market from a broken idea into a seriously powerful weapon for climate action. They're making a huge bet that putting a real, unavoidable price on pollution is the fastest and best way to get to a green economy. The crucial question now, the one everyone is watching, is this: as Europe forges ahead, will the rest of the world even try to keep up?